In this video, we are going to create this random background generator using React and Tailwind. Once you click on this button, we create a random background gradient every single time. The gradient direction is random, as well as the colors and color tones. We are going to be creating this part by part, and I will be explaining every single line of code. So let's get into it. So here I have my empty React project with Tailwind inside. If you don't know how to create one, you can click on the card and watch this video where I create a modern portfolio website using React and Tailwind. And at the beginning of that video, I explain how to create a empty project like this from scratch. So before we start, let's go into this readme file and delete everything and create a list of to-dos. In this way, we are going to break down the project into smaller challenges and it will be easier to know what to do next. The first thing that we are going to do is to create the UI, which is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to have a card in the middle. We're going to have the title, a button, and a little box that is going to display the generated background gradient. Next, we're going to create an array with Tailwind gradient direction classes inside, such as background gradient to top, background gradient to left, right, etc. Next, we are going to create a function that will randomly pick one of these classes from this array. Create a function that returns a random gradient direction from the array. Next, we are going to create a function that returns random color names and random color numbers. Inside this function, you're going to have two arrays just like this one, but these two arrays are going to have random Tailwind colors such as blue, red, indigo, purple, and the color numbers such as 100, 200, 300. Next, you're going to create a state variable to be able to update the changing background. So when we create a state variable using useState, we're also going to have a setter function, and a setter function is basically responsible for updating the current state. So let's say when you open the website, the background is white. That means the state of the background color is white, and by using these functions that will retrieve random numbers, random colors, and random gradients, we are going to update this state using the setter function, and this is how we are going to keep track of the changing background color. Next, we are going to create a handler function to return a random gradient on each click and update the background state using the setter function. So I mentioned this setter function a second ago. We are just going to put this logic inside this handler function, and we're going to use this handler function inside a button. So every time you click on the button, we update the background color. And finally, we're going to create a function that will automatically copy the gradients when you click on it. And these are the steps that we are going to follow. If you want to challenge yourself, you can pause the video here and try to do this on your own. Let's leave this open and go into the app.jsx file. So we are going to start with creating the UI. Let's use this div as the background. I will set its minimum height to screen. That means minimum height 100 VH. So this div will cover the entire page. And we are going to be using this when we are going to change the background color. Let's set the width to 100% and make this a flex container. Center the items. And for now, I will set the background color to white. So later on, when we create the logic to randomize the background, we're going to turn this into a dynamic string and replace this with the background state. Inside, we're gonna have another div. Let's set the font to mono, make it a flex container, and change the flex direction to column. Center the items, center the text, and put some space between the elements that we are going to create. For screens that are bigger than medium, the space UI is going to be 10. Padding on the UI axis is going to be 8. So padding top and bottom to rem. And padding on the X axis is going to be 12. For the medium screens, it is going to be 16. Let's give it a 2 pixel border and a drop shadow. Also, let's create a margin on the X axis, so left and right 5. Set the background color to white and text color to black. So inside this div, we're gonna have 3 elements: a title, background generator. Let's increase the size of the text. For the medium screens, it is going to be 6x large and text black. Right under this H1, you're gonna have the button that says generate random background. Background black and text white. Padding 2. For the medium screens, it is going to be 3. Font semi-bold and text large. For the medium screens, it is going to be X large. Let's give it some rounded corners, and when you hover over this button, you're gonna lower down the opacity to 80. Let's create a transition for the hover effect as well. So right under this button, still inside this div, we're gonna create this H3, padding 3, border 2, and rounded corners, text large. For the medium screens, it is going to be X large, font semi-bold. Let's make the background gray and cursor pointer. So when you hover over this H3, this will indicate that this is something clickable. And inside this H3, we are going to be displaying the generated background color. But now let's just write it down. So this is how it looks now. Looks like we're missing a rounded corner on this container. So let's add rounded corners. And there you go. We have finished the basic UI. Let's go into the README file and check this one out. Next, we are going to create an array with Tailwind direction classes. Let's go back into the app.jsx file. And outside this component, let's create an array with the name gradients. So inside this array, we're going to have Tailwind gradient classes such as background, gradient, to right, to left, to top, to bottom, bottom left, bottom right, top right, and top left. And this is all the gradient classes. So let's go back into README and check this out. Next, we're gonna create a function that returns a random gradient direction class from the array. Right under this array, let's create a function named random gradient. So to be able to return a random index from this array, we need a random number. So let's create a variable named random index, and using math.random and multiply it by gradients.length, we can get a random number, but math.random doesn't return a whole number, so we need to wrap this around a math.floor, and now we have a random number. This needs to be gradients, by the way. So each time you call this function, we're going to create a random number depending on the length of this array, and we're going to put that random number inside this, and we're going to use that random number to get a random item from this array. We can go into the to-do list and check this one out. Next, we will create a function that returns random color names and random color numbers. Let's go into the app.jsx file. Under this function, I'm going to create another one named random colors. So inside this function, we're going to create two arrays, colors and random color numbers. So this first array is just going to have the color names inside: red, blue, green, yellow, purple, indigo, and teal. And this second one is going to have the color tones: 200, 300, 400, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 900. So now that we have these two arrays, next we need to select a random one from each of them, just like we did with this gradient array. We're going to create a variable named random color, and we need to pick a random index from this array, and we're going to do it by using math random again. We're going to multiply it by the length of this array, and we're going to wrap it inside math.floor to get a whole number. So this one selects a random color name from this array, and we're going to do the same thing for the second one as well. Let's just copy and paste this. This is going to be random number, random color numbers, and random color numbers dot length. And now we can combine these two and return a dynamic string. First, we're going to return random color, and we're going to put a dash in the middle, and then we're going to return the random number. So this is going to turn out like blue 500, red 300, yellow 700, and so on. Let's go back into the to-do list, and we can check this one out. Next, we're going to create a state variable using useStateHook to keep track of the changing background color. Let's go back into the app.jsx file, and inside this app component, let's create a state variable. Let's call it bgClass, and the setter function is going to be set bgClass is going to be equal to useState. So my VS Code automatically imports useState at the top. If that doesn't happen for you, you need to type this down. And the initial state is going to be bgwhite. So this is the state variable, and this is the function that is responsible for updating this state. And currently bgClass is equal to bgwhite. And as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we are going to use this bgClass to change the background color. So that means we can replace this bgwhite with bgClass. Let's also turn this into a dynamic string. Let's go back into the to-do list, and we have created a state variable to keep track of the changes. So we can check this out. Next, we are going to create the most important part, which is the handler function. Create a handler function to return a random gradient on each click and update the background state using the setter function. So right under this state, let's create a function named handleClick. So first, we are going to put these functions that we create inside some variables to be able to use them. So const gradient is equal to random gradient. So whenever we use this, we're going to call this random gradient function that picks a random gradient direction from this array. And from color, we're going to use backticks and say from dash, and we're going to call this random colors function again. And this function is basically going to return a random color. Next one is going to be toColor. 2 dash random colors. And there is one more thing we need to add. Let's say you create a background gradient to right. Let's say from blue 100 to sky 500. You can also put another color in the middle of this using via. Let's say via indigo 500. So this is completely optional and you might add this or not and it is still going to work. So that means we also need to randomize if we are going to add via or not. So let's create a variable named include via, and using math.random, let's return a random chance that we are going to add it or not. This is going to return a number between 0 and 1. Let's create another variable named via color. So if the include via is true, we are going to return this dynamic string, just like we did with these two. We're going to call the random colors function to randomly select a color. Otherwise, if it's not true, we are going to return this random string. So now we have everything we need to return a completely randomized gradient. Now all we need to do is to use this setter function to update this bg class, which is going to change the background color when we update it. Using the setter function, we are going to return this dynamic text. So first, there's going to be the gradient. Next, the from color. Next, the via color. And finally, the to color. The first one is going to return a random direction. This one is going to return a random color name and color tone. The via color is also the same, except we have this little if statement over here to decide if we are going to add it or not. And to color is the same as well. Now let's use this handle click function inside this button using onClick. So that means every single time you click on this button, we are going to call this handle click function. So let's go into the to-do list and check this out. Let's also display the randomly generated gradient inside this h3. Let's open up a set of curly braces and put the bg class inside. Next, we are going to create a function that automatically copies the generated background when you click on it. So right under this handle click function, you're going to create another function, copy to clipboard. So to be able to copy the text inside this h3 when you click on it, we are going to use the clipboard API inside JavaScript. So every time you click on this h3, we are going to copy whatever is inside this bg class. We're also going to create a pop-up that is going to be visible on the screen for 2 seconds. To create the pop-up, we need to create another use state. Let's call this one model visible, set model visible. And the initial state is going to be false because we are not going to be displaying this model until you click on the h3. So going back inside this function, we're going to set the model visible to true. And we are going to set it true for 2 seconds. So after 2 seconds, we are going to set it to false. So let's create the little pop-up outside this div. Let's open up a set of curly braces. If the model visible is true, we are going to return this div. It is going to be fixed at the bottom. A flex container, we are going to send the items to the end. Margin bottom 32. Justify center. Inside, we're going to have another div. And inside this paragraph copied to clipboard and this little emoji. Let's give this one a padding of 5 and rounded corners. A drop shadow, background black and text white. Let's increase the font weight of this text and the text size. And now that this is done, we can go into the to-do list and check this final one out. Let's also call this function inside this h3 on click. Copy to clipboard. So there's only one thing left to do, and this is going to be a little bit confusing, but I will do my best to explain it. Inside this config file, we need to add what we call a safe list, which is going to include a pattern. So right under this, I will just copy and paste this. You can pause the video and type down the same, otherwise the app is not going to work. And the reason why it's not going to work without this is we create these classes dynamically, and basically Tailwind doesn't wait for us to create these gradients before it's rendering. So when you open the website and generate a new background, it is not going to be visible because Tailwind is not going to wait for these classes to be generated. And by typing down this safe list that includes a pattern like this, we basically override that logic. Now let's see if everything is working fine. And as you can see, when we click on the generate random background button, we display the generated background color, and we also display it at the background. Let's try to copy this. And as you can see, there is the pop-up. Copy it to clipboard and you can paste it wherever you want. Seems like everything is working fine. So this is how we can create this random background generator using React and Tailwind. I hope you guys find it helpful and enjoyed it. Thank you for your time, and I will see you next time.